Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Glad to have this man back. He, of course, is a visiting fellow economics at the Heritage Foundation. It's Peter St. Onge. Peter, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm doing great, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
So we just had a whole interview before we started the interview, and it was a great conversation. I don't know much about Kamala Harris's economic outlook. I know as a senator, she was ruled the most liberal, the most progressive senator in the U.S. Senate. As the Attorney General of California, she has nothing to do with economics. What do we know about her economics or economic outlook compared to Joe Biden? Is it exactly the same? Is it different?
Yeah, so she is Joe Biden on steroids. Her positions are uniformly to the left of Joe Biden. And this is how she's talking in the general campaign, right? Usually, as a candidate, in the early part of the process, you talk about all these left-wing utopias. And then once you get to the general, you steer towards the center.
Right.
No, she is hardcore way to the left of Joe Biden. So she has pushed for Medicare for all. She wants to ban all fracking, right? Joe Biden has only banned fracking on federal land.
Right.
Okay. She has advocated banning all fracking whatsoever for the climate. She wants to repeal the Trump tax cuts. But see, Joe Biden has only talked about repealing them for people making over 400, right?
Right.
That was his big magic line. Kamala wants to repeal them for everybody. She wants to raise the estate tax, right? She thinks that it doesn't hit hard enough. And of course, that forces people to sell their family businesses. They have to
Right.
carve them up to give this huge chunk to the government. There's clips coming up now. We didn't know that much about Kamala because she wasn't really op research, right? Most of the focus had really been on Biden. So now we're finding all these beautiful clips of Kamala advocating various positions. One of the things that she is making the rounds now, she's promoting a 70 to 80% tax rate and banning automobiles in, quote, 11 years. Now, that came from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and they asked her during the interview, what do you think about this kind of idea? She said, these are all ideas that are really worth discussing. So she is giving absolutely no backlash to the most extreme parts of the Democrat Party. Biden, believe it or not, Biden for the Democrat Party, he was a centrist. Kamala, her father was a Marxist college professor, and it shows every single one of her policy priorities have been Marxist. The media is obviously going to parachute in here every single time they say, she's a centrist who calls the balls and calls the strikes. She calls it like she sees it. She just does what makes it. Every single time they do that, they did that with Obama. They do that with every single one of them. Truth of the matter, she is far to the left of Joe Biden. As you say, she's even to the left of Bernie Sanders.
Wow. That's hard to do. It's Peter St. Onge. Go to petersaintonge.com. Follow him at Prof. St. Onge, Prof. St. Onge over on X. So as I'm listening to what you're saying, the backlash I always get when I talk about how great the Trump tax cuts were and still are, they sunset next year. Joe Biden was centrist on that, and he talked about $400,000. Recently, he has said he's going to let them expire, and the taxes will go up on everybody. And as you and I have talked about before, everybody who pays income tax got a tax break. There's an argument from people like in California, Illinois, and New York, well, no, we didn't get a tax break. Well, yeah, you did, but the central government under Trump also said we're not going to subsidize your state taxes anymore. So you're actually seeing what the state is charging you. So everybody who collects a paycheck, who pays income tax, got a tax break. And should that go away, the taxes will go through the roof. Do you think they'll keep lying through this election cycle, pretending like it's going to be only for the billionaires and the corporate buddies of Donald Trump, when you and I both know that legislation covered everybody paying income tax?
100%. That's, I think, really what's changed over the past, more or less since Obama, is that in the old days, the media used to pretend to be neutral.
Yes.
Right? They would at least give some face time to the Republican point of view. Sure, they were 80, 90% on the Democrat side. What's changed, I think, really since Obama, and I'm guessing it's because of social media, the media sort of chose a side. They are lying on everything. They will cover everything. So as you say, the trick with income tax is always that anytime you cut income tax, the truth of the income tax is that it's almost all paid by rich people. Poor people don't pay income tax. They pay very, very small amount. The bottom half of Americans pay zero income tax. The bottom 90% of Americans pay something like 10 or 20% income tax. So anytime you reduce taxes, of course, most of it's going to go to rich people because that's who pay in the first place.
Yes.
So always the media twists this into saying, this is just a handout. But the reason for passing tax cuts in the first place is that you want to make it pay for people to work, right? You have two options when you're raising taxes. You can either tax work or you can tax consumption, right? Between the two of them, just like if you tax cigarettes, people smoke less. If you tax work, people will work less, right? So it is much smarter to tax consumption.
Right.
Now, rich people consume much more, right? They have swimming pools, they have big houses, they have yachts. So if you tax consumption, you're still socking it to the fat cats. But the point is that you are not discouraging work. You're not discouraging people from starting businesses and creating jobs.
And there's a piece to that, Peter, that a lot of people don't even realize. I know that you do. When you tax consumption, the people who are circumventing the tax code have to pay tax. Those who are drug dealers making millions of dollars have to pay tax. Because when you buy something, it doesn't ask what do you do for a living. It doesn't ask how much income tax do you pay. It says, okay, you want that big screen TV or that yacht or that fill in the blank. You're going to pay I think the percentage by the fair tax is like 23, something like that. You're going to pay a percentage on what you consume. If you have less money, as you said, you won't consume as much. You won't pay as much tax.
Right.
And I think some people, when they talk about sort of a fair tax or a consumption tax base, also talk about some sort of stipend every month for those who are very low income. So it could work, and it could work very well. But why change it when you can screw everybody with a progressive system and then claim that the rich people are not paying their fair share? They can't change that narrative because they're really getting way more money than they deserve in central government.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's, one of the dirty secrets of the income tax is that there's basically a ceiling on what people pay. All right. So if you look at, for example, the Forbes 500, right, the richest people in America, there is a ceiling where nobody pays more than 25% in tax. All right. And the reason is because if your tax rate is supposed to be 40% or 60% or 80%, what you're going to do is hire better and better lawyers and better and better accountants, and you're going to dodge out of it. Now, rich people don't like paying $1 million lawyers. They won't hire them unless they have to. But there's some point where taxes are so high that they do. So that means that realistically, once you're past something like 23 or 25%, if you quote unquote raise taxes after that, you're not going to get the billionaires. They're not available. Their lawyers, their accountants are smarter than the people in government. What's going to happen is that everything you raise above that, it's going to wash back onto the middle class. That's what you're seeing now is that you've got, guys who start lawn businesses or car repair, right? Guys who might make 250,000. They work very hard, right? They had to work decades to build up to that, but they make something like that. Those are the guys who are going to get socked. It's the small businesses, mom and pop restaurants. They are going to pay those. The billionaires are never, ever going to pay those extortionate tax rates. When Kamala talks about 70, 80% tax rates, functionally, she's talking about hitting small businesses with that.
Yeah, and by the way, that's lower than somebody like Ilhan Omar actually said it should be 90% at one point in an interview. It's Peter St. Onge. Go to peterstantonge.com, visiting fellow economics at the Heritage Foundation. We're finding out in real time how bad these economic policies of the left are. If you look at California, they forced a $20 an hour minimum wage. Guess what? Everybody got laid off. The company started closing down. They said either we can make the burger and make a little bit of a profit and keep our business open and employ 10 people, or if you need us to double the pay rate, we can lay off half the people and try to survive and probably end up closing down the small business. So these policies never, ever work. Peter, why do they keep on bringing them up? What do they hope the end game is going to be, that everybody becomes reliant on government and small businesses can't survive? They don't want them to?
Yeah, one of the things I'd love to see in government is that if you win an election, what you have to do first is you have to do a 3-month boot camp where you actually have to go run a McDonald's. All right, you got to have some clue of how business works. These guys, they're living on some cloud up there. They haven't the slightest idea. So that's exactly what ends up happening. I don't think they're destroying business on purpose, right? I think that they want small businesses to just pony up the money and keep losing money.
They obviously can't afford that.
That's the thing, right? None of us. So like if you had to wake up every morning and go to work and actually pay them, right? You're not going to get a salary. You got to pay work to go. You're not going to do it. And guess what? A restaurant owner is not going to do it either. If you're losing money, you have to shut down. You would be an absolute idiot not to shut down. So that's what's happening. The end result, we see it in a city like Detroit, let's say, where the jobs vanished. Now, they say, well, sure, the car companies went away. All right, talk about the suburbs of Detroit. The suburbs of Detroit have plenty of jobs. They've kept
Right.
growing. They're bigger than ever. The point is that the government of cities like Detroit, Baltimore, and now San Francisco, they've turned into predators. They go after these small businesses, and it ends up, sadly, it doesn't punish them, because what happens is those small business owners, they leave. They're not voters anymore.
Right.
They're out of the equation. The people who are left, those are people who are very, very open to bigger government, more benefits, more handouts. So the people who destroy these cities, they actually do great. There's a term for this called the Curly effect, from what happened in Boston, certain parts of Boston where people got chased out. But those people then become entrenched, almost like a monarchy. If you look at the people who run places like Detroit, Baltimore, it is the same gang year in, year out. The people who live there can see it. Right, they can see it around it. Their kids can't walk to school. There's no businesses. You're surrounded by abandoned buildings. You got a liquor store, a gas station, and like a Chinese takeout with bulletproof glass. Whereas, 40 years ago, you had a very vibrant community full of small businesses. They see it, but they're being bribed into keep voting for more of this socialism that's destroying their communities. So now the question is, are we going to take that nationwide? You do it nationwide, we don't have anywhere to go, right? Most Americans cannot up and move to the Cayman Islands and restart their lives.
Right.
We're stuck.
Well, it's a great point, because, as you said, the Californians are coming here to Texas, where I am. They're going to Tennessee. Yep. They're going to Florida, where they know they can survive. And by the way, these stupid policies by these leftists have literally they brought on the advent of the ATM, or kiosks at McDonald's, or kiosks when I go and buy my groceries. Yep. I literally am like subsidizing my work for those companies so I can go check myself out, because they can't afford to hire somebody. How they can't understand that blows my mind. I still do think it's about us being reliant on government for everything, but we can talk more about that next time. It's Peter St. Onge, visiting fellow economics, the Heritage Foundation. When we talk about the policies of the Trump economy pre-COVID and the policies of the Biden economy, the Biden economy, or the economists on the left, are saying Biden did so much better because he brought back all those jobs that were lost for COVID, and then millions more. But I think the dirty little secret is that they brought back a bunch of part-time jobs, and many people are working 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. What's the truth? Are Biden's policies really better when it comes to creating jobs in America?
Yeah, so this is the gaslight of the election, is they are... if you look at the Trump economy before COVID hit, it was one of the strongest economies we have ever seen in this nation. Probably the strongest, certainly since the early 1960s. I mean, it was a return to the golden age. And then, of course, once COVID hit, a lot of that was pushed by the left, right? The most extreme COVID responses were in left-wing states like California or New York. And of course, that wiped out millions and millions of jobs, right? And then once the election was safely taken by Biden, then they let off, and all those jobs came bouncing back. So they are playing this game now where they're going to say all of those job losses, that was all, on the Trump economy, and then all the rebound is on the Biden economy. But the truth is that if you look at the 3 years before COVID hit, the Trump economy was astounding. We had very low inflation. We had amazing job growth across the range, right? With, especially among younger workers, Black, women, all these groups were doing fantastic under Trump. On the other hand, under Biden, even the numbers that we've seen over these past 2 years, they are cooked through and through. We've got about 5 million Americans who dropped out of the labor force. That's what's making the unemployment rate look good. The jobs numbers they're overwhelmingly, we're losing full-time jobs, and those are being replaced by gig work or part-time jobs. Now, that's something that people only do if they're in economic distress. So the job market is telling us this is not a healthy economy, that actually people are getting deeper and deeper into trouble, and that's what's pushing them into the labor market out of desperation. So given a choice between the two, I think without a doubt, a Trump economy promises to be far stronger than Biden. The one sort of inflationary, peg that the media is pushing on is tariffs, right? So tariffs raise the cost of imports. Now, first off, we saw the Trump tariffs when he was president in those first 3 years. They had almost no impact on inflation. Secondly, almost all those tariffs, Biden kept them around. There's very little difference between the parties, but that's really all the media has to hang it on. Aside from that, Trump's growth was very strong. Strong growth reduces inflation because you have inflation fundamentally is money chasing goods. If you have more
Yes.
goods, then inflation is going to come back down. So I would expect in a Trump 2.0 that we would go back to that strong growth, strong jobs, lower inflation.
Peter, can they talk their way out of the inflation, out of the increased interest rates, out of the inavailability or unavailability of money to even borrow? And can they talk their way out of grocery prices, energy prices, all prices are up? Some of them double, some of them triple, some of them 30%, but everything is more expensive now, and real wages have not grown with that. Can they talk their way out of that? They're trying to, but I'm not buying it. Are you?
Yeah, well, that's the trick, is that the media has gone so lapdog on Democrats at this point that nothing is beyond them. I mean, we're seeing it in real time right now, where they're trying to rehabilitate this Kamala Harris, who, America had a chance to vote for Kamala, and she got 1.5% Democrat primary. Nobody likes her.
Right.
They, salvaged her off the junk heap, and it's just astounding to watch the media. It's like living in the Soviet Union. They're just tongue bathing this woman to try to turn her into something that Americans can actually stand.
No, St. Onge, no. I don't want to hear about tongue bathing anybody. And you're right. They're lapdogs, and that's exactly what they're doing. But when it comes to the economy, I think the good news is, although it's bad news, is that people aren't stupid. They know they're paying paycheck to paycheck. They know that they're barely able to get their housing expenses. They can't go on vacation. They can't even go out to a restaurant because they're strapped for money. No matter how many times KJP or Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or fill in the blank person says it, they just don't realize how good they have it. The people know they don't have it very good. I mean, that's the saving grace, right?
Yeah, well, there was a poll that just came out that roughly 60% of Americans believe we're in a recession right now. Okay, so Americans, they look around, they see what the prices are, they see what their paycheck buys. Americans know what's happening to them. And this fundamentally is a saving grace. Even in the Soviet Union, right? The Soviet Union had a thoroughly controlled news media until the very end. You were thrown in jail for saying the wrong thing. We're not far from there here, but still. And yet, people in the Soviet Union understood what was happening, right? They knew that life sucked and that their government was the cause of it. And the end result was that, Tuesday morning, everybody was a good Marxist. Wednesday afternoon, nobody had ever believed in that garbage. So that's really the saving grace, is that there is some point where voters can actually see what's happening around them, and they start doubting the narrative.
When it comes to Kamala Harris, let's get together again as we go closer to the election, as we get out of the DNC and see exactly what sort of pitch they're making to the American people. Let's break it down economically. Thanks a million for coming on, Professor. We appreciate you.
Of course, Joe. Always a pleasure.
All right, brother. We're back after this in the Joe Pag Show. Stay right here.